Well, I don't know if there's any dads out there, but I'll let you know that one of the time-honored rituals that happens as you get older and your kids get older is that they mock you for the way that you parented them and some of the choices you made along the way. You know, one of the things my kids mock me for is the movies that I brought home for them to watch. Of course, they don't give me credit for bringing Star Wars home, which they thought was the best movie ever. In fact, all they ever wanted to watch after that was Star Wars. But they remind me that I brought home a movie called The Road, which gave them nightmares, or the movie The Postman, another post-apocalyptic movie with Kevin Costner, which was universally panned as a horrible movie, but I thought it was a great movie. So now, every time this argument comes up, we get together for Christmas, is how good The Postman was. There's this great line by Costner in the movie The Postman. Here it is.
He has a saying, stuff's getting better. Stuff's getting better every day.
So now whenever I see them, I bug them by asking them, is stuff getting better? Now, recently I saw an old clip where Stephen Colbert came to my rescue. This is what he said about people who pan the movie The Postman. So here you go.
This fall, Warner Brothers proudly presents the re-release of Kevin Costner's 1997 film, The Postman. In its day, a critical and box office disaster, but today, chillingly accurate.
I'm a representative of the United States government, authorized by restored Congress to reestablish communication route.
What's that mean in English?
Means I'm your postman.
Looks like somebody owes Kevin Costner an apology. Say you're sorry. Say it. Apologize to Kevin Costner.
So the bottom line is I rest my case. It was a great movie. I'm sticking to that version of truth. And today I want to ask you the same question for our podcast topic today. As you look at your life and your years of embedded porn habits, for you, as you look at your recovery now, is stuff getting better? Is stuff getting better for you every day? Welcome aboard.
Ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, back in podcast episode 57, I did this podcast called Measuring Progress. And maybe it would be a good time to go back and take a listen to that, because that really is in the background of some of what I want to talk about today. But let me just give you a summary of what I spoke about in that podcast. And what I said in that podcast was we need to move past the sole metric of clean time as we begin to look at some other ways of measuring progress. Progress, I'm not sure which one it is. Progress or progress, take your pick. But in that episode, we asked the question, are you making progress from moving out of isolation and moving, for example, into a more connected life where you are becoming more open, more known, more honest, and more vulnerable? So beyond just clean time, that is one of the ways that you could ask yourself, am I making progress? We asked another question. Am I growing or making progress in my emotional awareness, my emotional growth, and my emotional health? For example, am I becoming more aware of the nuances around my emotions and how it plays and how they play into my pull towards porn? Do I simply reach for the old medicine cabinet every time I have a negative emotion? Here's another way we talked about progress. And I said, are you moving from and beyond the place where you're simply seeing everything out of a threat matrix, and are you beginning to see what maybe were traditional threats to your recovery as now opportunities for you to grow stronger in your recovery? I went back and listened to that podcast as well. I know that sounds rather narcissistic. And in fact, in times I do go back and listen to some of my old podcasts because I also need to be reminded of some of this stuff. But going back, that whole podcast was, how do we measure the progress that we long for? All of us have struggled with embedded porn habits, and we want to know that things are getting better. Stuff is getting better for us every day. And if we don't have that, if we don't have a sense that we are getting better, progressing, moving forward, we get discouraged. We start asking ourselves, well, what's the use? Is this ever going to change? Here's maybe a different example of an idea of progress. Tomorrow is December 21st. That is, according to my understanding, the winter solstice. It's the day where it's the least sunlight for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere. Of course, if you're in Australia, this is going to be the longest day of sunlight for you. But, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about us here. And I always look forward to that day because I know that after December 21st, in fact, it's important because I hate dark days. And I hate days where the sun is still dark when I get up, and on the way home from work, it's still dark. And I love more daylight time. I love the light. And what happens after December 21st, winter solstice, is every day the sun starts coming up a little bit earlier and sets a little bit later. Here's a fun fact is what I learned in looking at this, as my son once say, fun fact. I thought it always is the same amount of time, the difference every day after the winter solstice. But you know what? That is not true. In fact, for the very first few days and weeks after the solstice, the amount of sunlight only changes by a few seconds. But as you move into February and March, it gets more and more sunlight. So when you get into those periods of time, you're actually adding 3 or so minutes of sunlight a day. Who would have thunk? I never knew that. I learned something new. So even the amount of time gets progressively longer as you move into spring. But here's the point. Stuff is getting better. Stuff is getting better for me every day. I see progress. And every day after tomorrow, December 21st, we get a little bit more light. So let me give you another way that I want to ask this question about progress as you're trying to evaluate, am I actually moving forward in my recovery away from porn? In those podcasts, we always talk about, leaving a life of porn, moving away from porn, and moving towards a better life, better relationships. Well, am I actually moving forward, or am I stuck? So here's a way that I want to maybe approach this. In a couple podcasts, 2 or 3 ago, I spoke about this little gratitude exercise that I often do, which really reminds me of the benefits that my recovery brings. And I go through this thing when I'm out for my walk. I'm thankful, for God and the support of others, for freedom rather than bondage. Thankful for peace rather than turmoil. Thankful for joy rather than despair. Thankful for clarity rather than confusion. I'm thankful for the confidence my recovery brings rather than timidity or fear. Do you remember that? I remind myself of that. I relish in those changes, those things that my recovery has brought into my life. So let's take each of those areas and ask ourselves, are some of those experiences, are they growing in my life? Because having freedom, peace, joy, clarity, and confidence, they're not just a discrete thing, not just an on or off thing. They're actually a spectrum thing that you can experience in different degrees, little towards a lot. So let's take each one of those areas and apply this question: are things getting better? Is stuff getting better for me every day? So let's talk first of all, in what ways am I experiencing or growing or progressing in freedom? Yeah, it could be that originally you never were able to go a day or a few days without the thoughts of porn consuming your attention. Maybe you were still coming out of your last relapse and the ripples were still reverberating 1, 2, 3 days. But now you were feeling tempted towards the next relapse. Or, and so you were just in this complete shame rinse cycle. And it was just constant in your life. It just was the constant battle of your internal emotions and energies. But now, have you grown to where it's not the defining struggle of each and every day? There's some days you get up and you get on with your life, whatever you have to do that day, and porn doesn't really intrude into your thoughts, your emotions, your struggles. And you go, okay, well, maybe I still have days like that, but more and more I'm experiencing some of these days, which I'm going to call freedom days. Do I see a growth in my ability to live life without porn, for example, as the constant sole focus or struggle, defining struggle of my life? If those numbers of days are growing, then you are experiencing progress or growth in your freedom. Let's ask the same question. Am I experiencing progress or growth in my sense of peace? So, peace is, of course, as opposed to turmoil. So am I spending less time in self-recrimination and loathing that comes and follows a porn binge? Are there less days when I wake up and the very first thought I have is that heavy sense of shame and regret for the activities of the previous night or the previous day? The more of those days of peace that I'm experiencing is, I'm going, yeah, I'm getting forward. I'm moving forward. I always think of peace. I don't know, a word picture that comes to my mind is I used to water ski when I was much younger and more agile. I used to slalom. And there would be times when I was water skiing and all of a sudden you would hit this glassy, usually going around a corner, you'd hit this glassy section of the lake. And that was a great picture of me of peace. It was opposed to when you were out trying to water ski and the wind was blowing and the waves were choppy and you were just bouncing and trying to stay afloat. So more and more of those glassy lake days, I'm going, yeah, I am experiencing more of those days. There's growth. Well, what about the idea of joy rather than despair? Are you growing in your sense of joy? And what do I mean by that? I just mean that you're living more and more days where you're not acting like your Eeyore self. Oh, I'll never change. I'm feeling down in the dumps. I'm enjoying life more. I'm laughing more. I'm finding new avenues of self-care or hobbies or passions, things that are different than just this artificial rush and roller coaster that porn brought me, right? It's true joy. It's not just the rush of dopamine. So yeah, are you having more days of that? These are markers that you can use to stake the hope of your recovery in. And, here's another one. Where are you at in your progress around clarity as opposed to confusion? One of the things that porn did for me is it left me in a state of continual brain fog. Do you notice days now where the fog is blown away and you can see clearly? Of course, porn also leaves me fixated on myself. It's selfish by nature. So are there now days as porn recedes into the background of my life where I'm actually able to grow in my concern and care and empathy for other people, not just myself? Another example, am I able to experience more clarity around maybe my role as a husband or a father? Of course, the problem with porn is that it robbed me of my ability to be fully present with my wife and my kids. So am I experiencing more of a growing, instead of brain fog, I'm having brain space to deal with some of those challenges. It's not easy raising kids, and it comes with challenges, but am I able now to bring more clarity and focused attention and problem solving to those areas of my life? That is another benefit as you grow and progress in your recovery. And the last one is, are you experiencing growth in your confidence? Your confidence in terms of moving forward in life. Now, wherever you're at, simply, it could be confidence that you're not so worried that the very first time that you have an open computer, you're going to act out. Or, the very first time your wife leaves the house or you go on a trip, that you're just destined to fall. Is that how you're experiencing confidence? Now, I'm not talking about a sense of invulnerability or overconfidence. I'm just talking about a confidence that if I follow the correct tools, as I take the necessary steps, I can live life with a sense of confidence. I was working with a single guy, and I loved to see the changes that was happening in his life. He'd essentially spent most of his 20s just kind of immersed in the whole under the cloud of porn. And he was looking back at his life and going, you know what? I have absolutely no confidence in dealing and building relationships with the opposite sex. I really want to develop healthy, whole relationships with the opposite sex. So as he began to gain confidence in his life, he ended up joining a book club where he discussed, ideas in a book club. And then he ended up joining a ballroom dancing club where he learned how to dance and learned how to, it was part of his growth in confidence. All of that was an example of growth and progress in confidence. I love that quote. It's taken from Craig Parra, who says, recovery is like 20% not looking at porn and 80% kicking ass in life. Well, in confidence, as you grow in that, you're going, you know what? My life is I have a lot more confidence to now move forward with some of these things that I've put on the shelf or put on pause. So all of this, I recognize as I have been walking through these areas, I have made a major assumption. And the major assumption or perspective that I've taken is that you are moving forward in your recovery. And so in that assumption, what I've really been arguing for is for you to have maybe fresh eyes to see some of those changes that you might not have thought about, things that are happening and growing and changing in your life that can help propel you to continue to have forward momentum. Now, I also recognize you might be listening to this podcast and go, Vern, I can't say that I am actually making progress. I'm getting older, but I'm not moving forward. Somebody once say, I want to grow up before I grow old. And you go, I'm growing older, but I'm not growing up. And, that's a hard place to be. And this, that feeling of stuckness, I'm just stuck. I'm not making any of these, I'm not experiencing any of this progress. As I hear you walking through those different qualities and areas in your life, I'm not experiencing that. That's hard to hear. Here's a funny story. When I used to go to summer camp, every summer, of course. And I remember I went to the same camp, and I had the same counselor for grade 9, grade 10, and grade 11. And my counselor, the third year he had me, I remember him saying something that just really pissed me off in my grade 11 year. And he said something along the line of, Vern, this is the third year you've been in my cabin, but you're just as immature as you've always been. You haven't grown at all. I was so angry with him, but it was like, you're just stuck. You're acting in grade 11 just like you acted in grade 9. Now, nothing against grade 9 boys. I still teach them at high school twice a week kind of thing. But you know what? Nothing against grade 9 boys. But if you're 2, 3, 5, 10 years older and still acting in the same way, you're still stuck in that mode, then there is a problem. And so what would I say to you? Well, I would give you that overused quote, which is this: if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always got. And so, maybe you're in that place. You're stuck in your recovery. You're stalled out, and you're getting to a point where you're just saying, you know what? I am sick and tired of being sick and tired in this same place. And, right now we're nearing the very end, winter solstice tomorrow of 2023. And you're going, you know what? A year from now, it's going to be December 20th, 2024. Doggone it, I want to be in a different place than I am right now. Because and I will say this, it could be that 1 year from now, you're exactly in the same place. Maybe you've even dug yourself in a bit deeper into some of those embedded habits. So I would really encourage you, do something different. I mean, if you've been listening to this podcast, you know all of the different examples that I've given. Reach out to me, Vern, bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. Get a hold of the traction course that's on the website, bandofbrothers.care. Join a group. If it's me, get coaching. Or join a traction group where I'm coaching. But it could be another group. It's not about you having to work with me. It's about you making changes to make sure that I want to continue to grow and move forward in my recovery. So this is probably the last one I give you before the holidays. So for all of you, Merry Christmas. Have a wonderful holiday season. And I really hope that you think forward to 2024 as you go, you know what? I really want to see progress as I move into next year. We'll see you then.